Now, Hollywood actor Johnny Depp was recently spotted at a high-end fine dining restaurant. Depp, who is on a celebration spree, was earlier spotted in Newcastle, Sheffield and Manchester, after his high-profile lawsuit against Amber Heard came to a close.
Johnny Depp walked into the diner, exhausted after a long morning of filming on location. The sun was unusually harsh that day, beating down on him relentlessly as he navigated through the chaotic streets. A long, hard day was finally winding down, and he needed a break. He hoped for some peace and quiet while enjoying a hot meal in the cool, air-conditioned comfort of his favorite diner, a cozy spot he frequented when in town. Johnny had seen all kinds of strange things on the sets of his films, but today was different. His mind was tired from the non-stop action, and his body felt drained from the long hours. As he slid into his usual booth, he let out a quiet sigh of relief. The staff at the diner all knew him by name, and a few of them waved as he took his seat. He smiled and waved back, grateful for the familiarity of it all. As Johnny began to settle in, something caught his eye. He noticed a father and son sitting at a table nearby, two faces he didn't recognize. The boy, no older than 4, sat on his chair with his legs dangling over the edge, looking bored and restless. His father was beside him, but his attention was entirely consumed by a phone call, his voice loud and angry as he barked commands at whoever was on the other end. The boy seemed visibly uncomfortable, and Johnny's heart went out to him. Johnny took a deep breath, trying to relax as his food arrived. The smells of a freshly prepared meal filled the air, and for a moment, Johnny allowed himself to just enjoy the moment. But it wasn't long before he noticed the little boy's eyes fixated on him, a look of curious innocence. Johnny met his gaze, offering a friendly smile, but the boy quickly turned away, his small face flushed with unease. Johnny returned to his meal, but something felt off. The boy's eyes kept returning to him, each time with a more intense look of unease. Johnny watched as the boy stood up, seemingly uncertain of what to do next. His father, oblivious to his son's movements, continued his angry phone conversation. Johnny wondered what could have possibly made this child so nervous, especially considering how innocent and harmless Johnny appeared. The boy took a few hesitant steps toward him, his eyes still locked onto Johnny's. Johnny paused, hoping to reassure him. He offered another warm, friendly smile. However, the moment the boy saw the smile, he seemed to panic and hurried back to his father, hiding behind the man's chair. Johnny chuckled softly to himself, pondering what the boy might have been told about him. He didn't think it was anything too serious, just the harmless fears children often had towards strangers. As Johnny turned his attention back to his meal, he couldn't help but glance over at the boy again. But this time, something was different. There was a heaviness in the boy's gaze, a sense of urgency that Johnny couldn't ignore. A few minutes later, Johnny noticed the boy once again get up and move toward him. The father remained glued to his phone, his loud voice filling the space between bites of his food. Johnny was careful to remain still, hoping not to frighten the boy off again. The boy stopped in front of him, looking back at his father before taking a deep breath. With surprising courage, he closed the remaining distance, standing so close, Johnny could feel his tiny breath against his skin. The boy looked up at Johnny with wide eyes and whispered something in his ear. Johnny's heart skipped a beat. He immediately turned pale, a cold shiver running down his spine. Whatever the boy had said was serious, and Johnny knew he had to act quickly. Without wasting a moment, he gently asked the boy his name. "Billy," the boy whispered softly. Johnny nodded, trying to keep his composure. "Billy," he said kindly, "why don't you sit with me for a moment? I'll make sure your father doesn't take you anywhere until we figure this out." Billy hesitated, but then looked over at his father, who was still yelling into the phone. The boy, with a quiet nod, sat down beside Johnny. Johnny made sure to keep a reassuring hand on his shoulder as he quietly reached for his radio, calling for backup. The minutes felt like hours. Johnny made a quick rundown of the situation over the radio, asking for backup to be on the way. He kept his voice calm, his grip on Billy never wavering. He needed to make sure this situation didn't escalate. He had no way of knowing if the father was armed or not. But Johnny knew one thing. He wasn't going to let Billy go anywhere with this man. Not until he could figure out what was going on. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the angry phone call ended. Billy's father, now looking around the diner, noticed that his son was no longer by his side. Panic flashed across his face when he saw Billy sitting with Johnny. The man's face twisted into an ugly expression, trying to mask his growing panic. Without a word, he stormed over to the table. "Time to go," he snapped, reaching for Billy. His tone was sharp, but Johnny was firm. He stood between the man and the boy, not allowing Billy to leave. "I don't think so," Johnny said, his voice low and steady. "Billy told me he's hungry. You forgot to order him something. He's going to stay here until we figure things out." Billy's father looked furious, his eyes narrowing with rage. "Mind your business," he shouted. He grabbed for Billy again, but Johnny held him back, his grip unwavering. Johnny calmly asked for the man's ID, and after a tense moment, the man pulled out a lawyer's ID card. The name read, Alfred. Johnny didn't recognize the name, but for a moment, doubt crept in. What if he was wrong? What if this was a simple misunderstanding? He looked at Billy's terrified face, and any doubts he had were gone. It didn't matter that Alfred was a lawyer. He was not going to let this man take Billy anywhere. Johnny handed back Alfred's ID, but his voice was firm. "Billy's staying for a bit. I'm going to make sure he gets something to eat." Alfred's eyes flickered with panic. His anger was growing, and Johnny could see the man's mind racing. Alfred's movements became more erratic, his behavior more suspicious by the second. Then, without warning, Alfred turned and bolted for the door. Johnny was quick to react, and just as Alfred reached the exit, he ran straight into the backup team Johnny had called. The officers seized him, and Alfred fought back with all his might. It took 3 officers to finally bring him to the ground and cuff him. As Alfred was dragged away, Johnny let out a sigh of relief. The immediate danger had passed. But Johnny wasn't done yet. He still needed to know where Billy's mother was. He turned to Billy, who was now trembling with fear. "Where's your mom, Billy?" Johnny asked gently. Billy's eyes filled with tears. "She's at home. She's hurt really bad." Johnny's heart sank. The urgency in Billy's voice told him everything he needed to know. Billy's mother was in danger, and time was running out. Johnny quickly asked if Billy knew the address, but the boy only described a toy store near their house. Johnny was able to piece together the neighborhood from the description. Without wasting a moment, Johnny ushered Billy to his patrol car. He locked the doors and set off toward the boy's home. They arrived at the neighborhood quickly, with Billy pointing out the toy store and leading Johnny to the small house at the end of the street. Johnny instructed Billy to stay in the car and locked it for safety before approaching the house. The door was unlocked, a clear sign that Alfred hadn't secured it before leaving. Johnny burst into the living room, his eyes immediately landing on Billy's mother lying on the floor, blood staining the carpet. She was barely conscious but whispered a faint, "Help," before her eyes fluttered shut. Johnny didn't hesitate. He immediately radioed for an ambulance, giving them the address, and began to administer first aid, trying his best to stop the bleeding. The ambulance arrived soon after, and the medics quickly took over, rushing Billy's mother to the hospital. As the ambulance sped away, Johnny stayed close to Billy, who was crying uncontrollably. Johnny reassured him as best as he could. "The doctors are doing everything they can to save her," he said. "She's going to be okay." At the hospital, Johnny stayed by Billy's side, comforting him as the doctors worked on his mother. Eventually, the boy calmed down enough for Johnny to gently ask about what had happened. Billy revealed the heartbreaking truth. His father, Alfred, had been the one to hurt his mother. He recounted the events, his voice shaking as he explained how his father had attacked her and how terrified he had been. Johnny listened carefully, not pushing the boy for more details, but making sure to remember everything for when the time came to take action. Johnny promised Billy that his mother would be safe now, and that Alfred would face justice for what he had done. Johnny stayed at the hospital, ensuring that Billy and his mother were cared for. Thankfully, the doctors managed to stabilize Billy's mother. She had lost a lot of blood, but her condition was improving after a transfusion. When she regained consciousness, the first thing she asked for was Billy. Johnny brought Billy to her bedside. Jasmine, weak but relieved, hugged her son tightly, tears of gratitude and love streaming down her face. Johnny remained quietly in the background, observing the tender moment between mother and child. He had done his part for the day. Now, he could go home knowing that he had made a difference. That's the kind of day Johnny Depp would remember forever. Elon Musk recently surprised a small town when he arrived in search of a young man whose struggles with bullying had caught his attention. The encounter, fueled by the pain of a teen's journey and the kindness of a visionary, turned into a story that would inspire millions. At 16, Daniel Rivera stood out at Tesla STEM High School, not for popularity or sports, but for his passion for engineering. Daniel's love for designing electric vehicles and rockets was unmatched, but it also made him a target. What should have been a reason for admiration became the source of cruel ridicule. Every lunch break, Daniel sat alone, sketching intricate designs for futuristic rockets or electric cars. His table, always tucked away in a corner, felt like a shield against the stares and laughter. Yet, despite his efforts to remain invisible, the bullying persisted. Dylan Carter, a senior with a reputation for being the life of the party, zeroed in on Daniel. Still working on that rocket to nowhere. Dylan's mocking voice would ring across the cafeteria, earning laughter from his entourage. For over a year, Dylan's bullying escalated. What started as teasing grew into physical acts of cruelty. He destroyed Daniel's notebooks, stuffed his backpack with trash, and once even upended a tray of food onto Daniel's carefully laid-out sketches. At home, Daniel's mother, Sophia, noticed the changes in her son. The dining table, once crowded with designs and blueprints, was now eerily tidy. His beloved 3D printer, which used to hum late into the night, sat silent and unused. Even his grades, always exceptional, began to falter. One evening, Sophia found Daniel sitting in his room, surrounded by crumpled papers and broken dreams. "Daniel," she said gently, "what's going on?" "They ruined everything," he whispered. His voice shook with suppressed emotion. Daniel's latest science fair project, a groundbreaking rocket fuel system prototype, had been sabotaged. Dylan and his friends had snuck into the workshop, destroyed months of work, and filmed the wreckage. The video, shared widely online, attracted cruel comments and amplified Daniel's humiliation. "Looks like your rocket's grounded," one comment read, while another mocked, "Maybe next time try something that actually works." Sophia's heart ached as she watched her son retreat further into himself. Desperate to help, she thought of Daniel's hero, Elon Musk. Musk had faced his own share of bullying as a child, but had risen above it to achieve global recognition. Sophia wondered if hearing from someone who understood might rekindle her son's passion. That night, Sophia posted a heartfelt message on X, formerly Twitter, tagging Elon Musk directly. She wrote about her son's talent and struggles, attaching photos of Daniel's designs. "My son Daniel is a brilliant young engineer who's been building rockets since he was 8, Sophia wrote. "But bullying at school has crushed his spirit. He just had his project destroyed. Elon Musk, you've been his inspiration for years. If you see this, please send some words of encouragement." Sophia didn't expect much, but she hoped for even a small gesture of support. The post gained a few likes and comments of encouragement from strangers, but by morning, her phone was buzzing non-stop. Elon Musk had replied, "No one should be bullied for their passion for science and innovation," Musk wrote. "Stay strong, Daniel. The world needs more dreamers like you." He ended with a rocket emoji. Sophia was stunned, and the news spread like wildfire. Within hours, Musk's response went viral, and Daniel's story became a trending topic. Messages of support poured in from around the world. Scientists, engineers, and even astronauts reached out to commend Daniel's talent and perseverance. 2 days later, as Daniel sat in his room, still overwhelmed by the sudden attention, a sleek Tesla Model X pulled up in front of their house. Sophia opened the door to find Elon Musk himself standing there, holding a small package. "Is Daniel home?" Musk asked with a kind smile. Sophia, too shocked to speak, called for her son. When Daniel appeared, his eyes widened in disbelief. "I heard you've been working on some amazing projects," Musk said, handing Daniel the package. "I thought you might need a little help getting back on track." Inside was a state-of-the-art SpaceX engineering kit, complete with advanced materials for building prototypes. But what mattered most were Musk's words. "When I was your age, I was bullied for being different," Musk said, looking Daniel in the eye. "But those differences are what make you unique. Keep building, keep dreaming. The world needs innovators like you." For the first time in months, Daniel felt hope reignite within him. His idol had not only noticed him, but believed in him. The news of Musk's visit spread quickly. At school, students who had once mocked Daniel now approached him with curiosity and even admiration. Dylan Carter, the ringleader of the bullying, was uncharacteristically quiet. The tables had turned, but Daniel wasn't interested in revenge or recognition. What mattered most was the encouragement he had received to keep pursuing his dreams. With renewed determination, Daniel dove back into his projects. He opened the engineering kit and marveled at the materials inside: lightweight alloys, advanced polymers, and a personalized note offering further mentorship from SpaceX engineers. The once-abandoned blueprint for his rocket fuel system now lay before him again. But this time, he saw opportunities to improve it. Late nights at his workbench became routine again as Daniel redesigned the fuel system with greater efficiency and precision. His improved prototype began to take shape, representing not only his technical skill but also his resilience. Word of Daniel's progress reached his teachers, and his physics instructor, Mrs. Thornton, arranged for him to present his project at a special assembly. Initially, Daniel hesitated. The thought of standing in front of the entire school was daunting, but Musk's words echoed in his mind. The world needs innovators. On the day of the presentation, Daniel stood nervously on the stage, his prototype beside him. As he began explaining the science behind his design, the auditorium fell silent. For the first time, his classmates truly listened. When he finished, the room erupted into applause. Mrs. Thornton beamed with pride. "This is just the beginning for you, Daniel," she said. The momentum didn't stop there. Daniel's work earned him a spot at a regional science fair, where his rocket fuel system prototype captured the attention of judges and attendees alike. One judge, a leading aerospace engineer, was particularly impressed. "This could revolutionize the industry," he said. Daniel won first place and secured a scholarship to a prestigious engineering program. But more importantly, he regained his confidence and sense of purpose. Over the months, Daniel's life transformed in ways he couldn't have imagined. His design caught the attention of SpaceX, leading to a summer internship offer. At school, the bullying became a distant memory as even Dylan seemed to reconsider his actions. Inspired by his journey, Daniel launched a mentorship program called Reach for the Stars, connecting STEM students with industry professionals. The initiative quickly expanded, helping countless young innovators who faced similar struggles. As Daniel shared his story with reporters, he reflected on how one act of kindness had changed his life. "Sometimes, all it takes is one person believing in you," he said. "Now it's my turn to be that person for someone else." Today, Daniel's dining table is once again covered in sketches and blueprints. Letters from students across the country fill the space as well, stories of resilience, dreams, and overcoming adversity. Daniel reads each one, remembering the moment his life changed forever, and using his own experience to inspire others. Years later, Daniel Rivera stood on a stage not unlike the one where he had first presented his prototype. This time, he wasn't just showcasing a project, he was delivering the keynote address at a global STEM conference. Scientists, innovators, and young dreamers from all corners of the world had gathered to hear from the young engineer whose story had inspired a generation. As he looked out at the audience, Daniel couldn't help but think of his journey, the struggles, the moments of doubt, and the incredible support he had received. Holding a small worn notebook filled with sketches from his teenage years, he began his speech. "Dreams often start small," Daniel said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "For me, they started at a lunch table surrounded by doubts and isolation. I didn't think anyone would ever see what I was working on or care about the designs I poured my heart into. But one act of kindness changed everything." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Elon Musk didn't just encourage me to keep going. He showed me the power of believing in others. And that belief sparked something greater than I could have imagined. not just in me, but in so many others who have shared their stories with me since. Behind him, a screen displayed photos from the Reach for the Stars program. Students presenting their own projects, teams collaborating on ambitious prototypes, and communities rallying to support young innovators. The initiative had grown into a global movement, with chapters in over 30 countries and partnerships with leading technology companies, including SpaceX and Tesla. It was nearing closing time at Poppy's Cafe, a small, cozy spot nestled in the heart of the town. Jada, a 28-year-old waitress, was preparing for another quiet evening shift. The regulars, mostly retired locals, came in for their nightly coffee and conversation, reminiscing about the past, and Jada found comfort in the predictable routine. For her, the slow-paced environment was a peaceful escape from the bustle of life, a safe haven where nothing unexpected ever seemed to happen. But tonight, that all changed. Just as Jada was tidying up, the bell above the door chimed, signaling the entrance of a new customer. As she glanced up, she froze. Standing there in the doorway was none other than Keanu Reeves, one of the world's most talked-about celebrities. Jada's heart skipped a beat. She'd seen him countless times on television and social media, but now he was standing in front of her, in the unassuming little cafe, looking just like any other customer. Jada's breath caught in her throat. She had expected to serve quiet, local patrons tonight, not a global icon who had shaped the entertainment industry. His presence filled the room, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. Even the regulars, who were usually wrapped up in their own stories, turned to stare, whispering among themselves. Jada's hands trembled slightly as she gathered her composure, reminding herself that Keanu was just another person. He might be famous, but that didn't change the fact that he was here for a simple meal like anyone else. She approached him, trying to hide her excitement behind a smile. "Hi there," she said, her voice a little shaky. "What can I get for you tonight?" Keanu looked up at her, his warm eyes meeting hers. "Just a coffee black," he replied softly with a small smile. "And maybe a slice of whatever pie you have." Jada nodded, still a little starstruck, and moved back to the counter to prepare his order. As she poured the coffee and sliced the pie, she couldn't help but glance at him every now and then. There was something calm and grounded about him, a stark contrast to the larger-than-life persona she'd seen on screen. Jada returned to his table with his coffee and pie, setting it down carefully. "Here you go," she said, doing her best to sound casual. "Thank you," Keanu said, his voice low and sincere as he looked out the window, lost in thought. He took a sip of his coffee, seemingly absorbed in his own world. Jada returned to the counter, still buzzing with a mix of curiosity and admiration. She had always respected Keanu for his grounded nature, his kindness, and his humble public image. But she couldn't help but notice the murmurs from the other customers. The regulars seemed less than thrilled by his presence, casting sideways glances in his direction. She wasn't sure why, but the vibe had shifted from quiet comfort to palpable tension. It didn't take long for one of the older men, a regular named Frank, to break the silence. He stood up from his booth and slowly made his way over to Keanu's table. Jada watched, her stomach tightening in anticipation of what might happen next. Frank had always been known for his blunt opinions, and she wasn't sure how this conversation was going to unfold. "Excuse me," Frank said, his voice gruff but loud enough for everyone in the cafe to hear. "Aren't you that actor from the movies? Keanu Reeves, right?" Keanu looked up from his coffee, his expression friendly but slightly wary. "Yes, that's me," he replied, a faint smile touching his lips. Frank crossed his arms, raising an eyebrow. "I remember you talking about some of the things you believe in. You've always been the kind of guy who's into doing good for the world. But tell me this, what's all this I hear about you starting a new company? Isn't it a little contradictory for you to be diving into tech when all you've ever preached is keeping things simple, staying humble?" Keanu's expression didn't change, though a hint of tension crept into his shoulders. He put his coffee cup down slowly, taking a moment to collect his thoughts before responding. "I get what you're saying, Frank," Keanu said calmly. "But this new project isn't about me. It's about making a difference. Technology is moving forward whether we like it or not. And I want to make sure that the advancements we're making aren't losing sight of the bigger picture. I believe we have a responsibility to create technology that's transparent, ethical, and focused on what truly matters. Frank didn't seem convinced. Sounds like just another business venture to me. You're looking to cash in on it, aren't you? Jada could see that Keanu's patience was starting to wear thin, but he held his ground, his voice remaining steady. It's not about money or power, he replied. It's about making sure we're not building things that we can't control or that can be used against people. Technology should serve the greater good, not just a select few. A few of the other regulars murmured among themselves, some shaking their heads, others offering skeptical glances. Jada's heart sank. She had always admired Keanu's vision and the way he carried himself. It wasn't easy being a public figure, and it seemed like the people in this room weren't willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Jada stood behind the counter, her heart racing. She had hoped to simply serve the man a cup of coffee and let him enjoy his quiet evening, but the tension in the air was undeniable. She glanced over at Keanu, feeling a strange mix of sympathy and frustration. She knew the world saw him as a hero of sorts, but in this cafe, it was clear that some of the people around her saw him as a threat. Finally, unable to remain silent any longer, Jada walked over to Frank's table. Her voice was steady, but her nerves were on edge. "Look," she said, addressing Frank directly. "I know not everyone agrees with what Keanu is doing, but you can't just dismiss him as a self-serving businessman. He's a man who's always tried to make the world a better place. He supported countless charities, funded projects to help those in need, and now he's trying to make sure that technology doesn't harm people in the long run. That's something worth recognizing." Keanu's eyes flicked to Jada as she spoke, a glimmer of surprise crossing his features. It was clear that he hadn't expected anyone to stand up for him, especially not in a small, quiet cafe like this. He gave her a nod of appreciation, a subtle smile playing at the corners of his lips. Jada continued, gaining confidence as she spoke. "Innovation isn't about making more money. It's about finding new ways to improve the world. That's what Keanu's trying to do. So, please, let's not judge him based on assumptions." The cafe grew quiet as the regulars digested her words. Some seemed taken aback, while others appeared unwilling to budge. Jada's voice faltered slightly, but she stood her ground, hoping that her words would make a difference. Just then, Mr. Smith, the cafe owner, walked in from the back. He took in the scene with a furrowed brow, his eyes flicking from Jada to the others. "Jada," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "What's going on here?" Jada hesitated, but she didn't back down. "I was just standing up for Mr. Reeves," she said softly, though she could feel the weight of the room's disapproval pressing down on her. Mr. Smith sighed and shook his head. "I appreciate your passion, Jada," he said, "but you can't argue with our regulars like this. They've been coming here for years, and they deserve respect. I think it's best if we find someone else to take your place." Jada's heart sank. She never expected a quiet evening of serving coffee to end like this. Her job was slipping away because she had simply stood up for what she believed in. The murmurs from the other tables made it worse, the sense of rejection cutting through her. Keanu, who had been listening quietly, stood up. "Thank you for defending me, Jada," he said, his voice kind but tinged with regret. "But I don't want to be the reason you lose your job. I'll head out now." Jada nodded silently, the sting of her dismissal still fresh. As Keanu turned to leave, the silence in the cafe grew even more suffocating. She felt the weight of every pair of eyes on her, the judgment in their gaze. She had stood up for someone she believed in, and it had cost her dearly. The following day, Jada walked into the cafe, her head heavy with the weight of the previous evening's events. The shame from being fired for something she thought was right still lingered, and she dreaded facing the regulars who had witnessed it all. As the day went on, the doorbell chimed, and Jada barely looked up, until she heard an excited whispering among the patrons. Her stomach flipped when she saw Keanu walking through the door again, his calm demeanor unaffected by the previous night's events. He scanned the room and nodded to the regulars before sitting at the same table by the window. Jada's heart raced. Why was he back? Had he come to rub it in? She approached his table, trying to hide the mix of emotions swirling within her. "Coffee again?" she asked, her voice still a little shaky. Keanu smiled at her. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you," he said, his expression sincere. "After I left here last night, I couldn't stop thinking about you standing up for me. So, I had my team check in, and we'd like to offer you a position." Jada blinked, her mind struggling to process his words. "What position?" she asked, barely able to believe what she was hearing. "We run a foundation," Keanu explained. "We're always looking for people who care, who have integrity, and who can connect with others. If you're interested, we'd love to have you work with us. It might be a small start, but it's a step in the right direction." Jada's mouth went dry, and she couldn't help but smile, her heart soaring with hope. Without thinking, she nodded. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'd love to." As Keanu left the cafe, he gave her a final nod. "I'll have my team get in touch," he said, leaving behind a stunned silence. Jada stood there, realizing that by standing up for someone she believed in, she had opened the door to an entirely new chapter in her life. What had started as a simple act of kindness had transformed her future in a way she never could have imagined.